A cuffless ring squeezes nothing yet claims your blood pressure, off by 8. That ring on your finger reports a top and bottom number with 0 squeeze, and it lands about 8 millimeters of mercury from a validated arm cuff. Here's why that gap matters. A blood pressure diagnosis turns on a razor-thin line, 130/80. Cross it and you might get told you're hypertensive. A doctor may start medication or raise a dose over just a few points. So an 8-point drift isn't cosmetic. It can straddle that exact line, pushing a normal reading into hypertensive territory or hiding a high one. A convenient wrong number can quietly steer a real medical call. The question underneath all of this: how can a device that never squeezes your arm claim to know the pressure inside it at all? Start with the tool doctors trust, the arm cuff. Here's the key idea: it doesn't guess anything. It physically measures the force. When the cuff inflates, it clamps down hard enough to pinch your upper arm artery completely shut. No blood gets through. Then it slowly lets the air out. At one exact pressure, your heartbeat is finally strong enough to punch the first spurt of blood past the squeeze. The cuff feels that spurt as a tiny thump against its own wall. That first thump, that's your top number, the systolic pressure. As the cuff keeps deflating, the thumping smooths out. The point where flow goes fully silent gives the bottom number, the diastolic. So the squeeze isn't in the way of the measurement. The squeeze is the measurement. The cuff plays a pressure it controls against a pressure your heart makes and reads the exact tie. That's a direct physical reading of the real thing. No model, no prediction, no personal profile required. It works the same on your arm as on anyone's. That is precisely why regulators and hospitals treat the cuff as the reference standard. The ruler everything else gets checked against. But it's clunky. It squeezes, it's bulky, it wakes you up if you wear it overnight. Which raises an obvious question: if the cuff works by squeezing and the ring never squeezes at all, what on earth is the ring measuring instead? Now open up the rings. Flip it over and there's no pump, no bladder, nothing that can press. Instead, there are tiny lights, usually green, sometimes infrared, and a light detector sitting right next to them. Here's the trick: the lights shine into the skin of your finger, and blood absorbs some of that light. Every time your heart beats, a fresh pulse of blood swells the vessels under the ring, so more light gets soaked up for a split second. The detector reads that as a dip. Beat after beat, those dips trace out the shape of your pulse, a little wave. That light-based pulse reading has a name, mmHg. And that's genuinely all the ring can see. Not pressure, never pressure. It sees timing and shape. So how do you get a blood pressure number out of a light show? You lean on things that tend to move together. When your pressure rises, your pulse wave travels through your arteries a hair faster, and the wave changes shape slightly. A stiffer, more pressurized pipe carries a pulse differently than a relaxed one. The ring clocks how long the pulse takes to arrive and studies the curve of that wave. Then it runs those clues through a formula and prints a systolic and diastolic number. Read that again because it's the whole catch: the ring never touches the pressure. It watches signals that correlate with pressure and predicts what the number probably is. It's an educated guess dressed up as a reading. Which forces the next question: a guess based on what exactly? Whose arteries taught it the formula? So a guess based on what? Here's the part almost nobody explains. That formula isn't one size fits all. Your arteries aren't minds, so the ring has to be taught your body first. That teaching step is calibration. You take a few readings with a real arm cuff, hand those true numbers to the ring, and it fits its formula to you personally. It learns roughly when this person's pulse looks like this, their pressure is that. For a little while it works pretty well. Then reality drifts. Your arteries aren't fixed pipes, they're living tissue that changes constantly. They stiffen a bit as you age. They tense up when you're cold and go slack when you're warm. A hot shower, a workout, being dehydrated on a long flight. All of it changes how your pulse wave travels. And the moment your body no longer matches the day you calibrated, the ring's learned relationship quietly goes stale. The pulse still looks fine to the sensor. The formula behind it is just wrong now. That staleness is the actual machinery behind the roughly 8-point error. It's not a bad sensor or a cheap part. It's a good measurement of the wrong proxy, run through a formula that assumed you'd stay the same. And here's the cruel twist. The drift isn't spread out evenly. It's worst at the extremes, when your pressure is genuinely very high or very low. Right in the middle, near normal, the guess is decent. But out at the edges, exactly where a real reading would matter most, where you'd actually act on it, the formula was trained on the fewest examples and strays the farthest. The device is least trustworthy at the precise moment you need it most. So if the ring drifts most when it matters most, can we even call it accurate? Who decides what accurate means here? So who decides what counts as accurate? There's an actual bar. To be trusted as a real medical instrument, a blood pressure device has to prove it lands within about 5 millimeters of mercury of a reference cuff on average, with the spread of its errors kept tight across lots of different people. Cuffs clear that bar. That's the whole reason they're the standard. And here's the blunt status in 2026. No cuffless ring on the market has cleared that clinical bar for a true diagnostic number. Independent testing keeps landing in that same 8-point-off neighborhood. Fine for a gadget, not fine for a diagnosis. But, and this matters, that doesn't make the ring useless. Not even close. Because the ring's weakness and its strength are the same coin. It's shaky on the exact value. It's genuinely good at direction. If your own reading was 118 last Tuesday and it's drifting toward 132 all week, that upward trend is real and worth noticing, even if neither exact number is perfect. The errors partly cancel when you compare you to yourself. That's where a ring shines. Your night-to-night patterns, how your pressure dips in deep sleep, whether a stressful stretch is nudging your baseline up. It's a smoke detector, not a thermometer. Great at shouting something's changing, lousy at telling you the exact degree. So the honest verdict splits cleanly in two. Trust the ring for the arrow. Is my pressure heading up, down, or holding? Trust the cuff for the actual number you'd ever write in a chart or hand a doctor. Use each for the job it's physically built to do, and neither one lies to you. But if the ring's number is a guess and the cuff's is real, why does that guess miss by 8 in the first place? Time to close the loop. Here's the full picture snapped together. The ring squeezes nothing because it was never touching pressure to begin with. It's reading light bouncing off pulsing blood, then guessing your pressure from the timing and shape of that pulse. And every guess is only as good as the lesson it learned. A lesson taught by one cuff on one day on a body that refuses to hold still. Your arteries stiffen, warm, cool, and dry out, so the guess slides away from the very cuff that trained it. That slide is the 8. 0 squeeze because it reads light. Off by 8 because a light-trained guess drifts from the pressure it was chasing. Both facts come from the same root, it predicts instead of measures. So the practical rule writes itself. Use the ring the way it's actually good. Watch the trend, catch the alerts, notice the patterns while you sleep. But the moment you need a real number, a number you'd act on, pull out a validated arm cuff and let the squeeze tell the truth. And the sharpest line of all, if you change a medication over 8 millimeters of mercury, do not let a device that's routinely 8 millimeters of mercury off be the one that makes that call. That decision belongs to the ruler, not the guess. So there it is, 0 squeeze, about 8 millimeters of mercury off. A ring that predicts your pressure from light instead of measuring it. Which opens the real frontier. What would it take to close that gap? Could a new signal, the exact shape of the pulse, a second sensor, a smarter calibration that updates itself, finally let a ring earn the cuff's job? That's the question worth chasing next. This content is educational, not medical advice.